Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L and now let's talk Shokugeki no Soma chapter 266. And before we get into the chapter as a whole, I did not have time to answer comments one by one in text this past week, but I do have time to address some of the comments now. So if you allow me a few minutes just to talk about Megumi and my general harshness. So if you guys have been following, you know I can be harsh sometimes. I'm not going to backpedal on it because what's the point of that, right? Like, at least expect some consistency from me, but I will say, like, yeah, sometimes I do think I do get carried away too much, and last week the target of that was Megumi. That said, you know, it's always in good fun. It's just at the end of the day, I enjoy the series that I cover the most of the time. I don't really quit any series, and I actually really enjoy getting comments that challenge my points or point out little things. And truthfully, with the Megumi thing, last week I was being harsh on Megumi and her win rate, and really when you like look at the numbers in terms of what she's done in the series, like she is trending towards the positive. But like a commenter mentioned it, Megumi doesn't get big wins, or at least when she loses, or well, to me, the way my feelings are playing into this is that when I see Megumi and she loses, it feels like she's getting set up to lose. It feels like if there was one person that could be sacrificed in any group when they're going into like group Shokugekis, it feels like Megumi's the one who will usually get that role. In the previous arc, Megumi only had one match, and like really that puts her in the same level as Subaru and Megishima, but because Megumi is also like one of the main characters, because we've also had more exposure to her, like the impression I have ultimately of her, I feel a little bit bad for the girl. Like it reminds me a lot in One Piece, where Sanji is one of the top tier characters, but he's the one that's most likely to get beat down to prove a point about the plot or about the plot obstacle, and that's where I think Megumi sometimes lives. But even when you look at just the numbers in terms of like what she's done in the Shokugeki she's been, it's really more balanced out. It's just an issue of like the impressions of her defeats really like they're at least they have a lasting effect on me, and that's where that harshness was coming out of. Anyway, I do know I get carried away with the harshness sometimes, but just know it's like I'm not meaning any ill will, and the impression videos tend to be like just my thoughts at the moment, and they're not usually as prepared as say the scripted videos. So yeah, that's kind of the reason for the harshness. Anyway, I feel okay spending 2 minutes talking about Megumi at the beginning because this chapter just kind of continued a really chill pace, and we just kind of continued going into the mystery. Now last week I mentioned, well, that this, or like last week's chapter, was going to be a bit harder to like actually critique, in the context of you can't critique it as a standalone chapter. Like you kind of gotta wait until we see the rest of the story to see whether or not the chill bits are going to be important later on. And like last week, I think I was trending towards negative on it. But this week, we got that little like scene with the, whatchamacallit, the foreigner? I think it was a foreigner, yeah. Because I think his Japanese was a bit weird and he was talking in a bit stifled fashion. But yeah, we got that, right? So last week's point was that this works better in the context of a full story. And in this case, now we're getting like a build up from those first couple of scenes. So this chapter is pretty good. Like I think when it comes to the narrative, this chapter redeems the last chapter when it comes to those pages that were just Soma talking to people, because it calls back to the local or local, how do you pronounce it? Local guy that Soma was talking to, and then it called back to the foreigner. Now I do really want to praise the foreigner, because the foreigner was positioned in the page from the last week's chapter where Soma was just goofing around, and at that point I don't take it seriously anymore. So you know what, if the foreigner is the guy that's the culprit, I'm gonna give props to the author. That was a pretty neat little trick there. You know, makes it work out. And I saw that in the comments Charles said have faith in the writer. It's like, okay Charles, I'll have faith, but it's more fun to not. It's more fun to not have faith and just complain about things. That said, I do want to give props. I think that's pretty good. I think in the context of the full story, I think that could be a nice little turnaround. And I personally feel like really odd because they took advantage of the character that I just stopped caring about in last week's chapter. So I think that's a really good move. I think if you're able to move suspicion, or if you're able to introduce a plot detail that the person doesn't know to care about, and then you like bring it back and potentially have it in play, I really enjoy that. I think that's a pretty neat little trick that the author pulled. I'm pretty happy like seeing it too. But I do wonder if it depends on like how long this is gonna last. Someone mentioned that this might be a full volume in the comments, and I'm sorry I didn't write down your name, but so they estimated 6 or 7 chapters, and I think that's like a pretty fair estimate for a small mini arc to start off a new saga anyway. In the case of it being 6-7 chapters, I wonder if it was okay to kind of give malicious undertones to the foreigner, because there might still be a possibility that the foreigner isn't directly involved in all this, that he's just doing something, but at this point it looks like it's him that's causing the problem. But I do wonder if it was okay to give it away in such a heavy-handed fashion. You know, like, this is again one of those things that we have to wait till we see the length of this thing and how this thing shakes out. But I think the author could have left it at, I think if he had left it without that ominous undertone, I think it could have still been a good enough interaction that when we look back at it without that ominous undertone, we could have been like, oh yeah, this is why the author was giving him that much attention. But if the author wants to handhold and he wants to lead us into this guy being the villain, that's totally fine too. I mean, at this point, I think the author's, well, for me, the author already won. So I think this is so far good. I will just be wowed though if this was just a red herring and it's something else altogether. I think that would be really cool, but I'm not expecting that much. I'm okay with this so far. The only other plot point I can say is that I'm really happy that Soma went and checked and looked in the kitchen through the window and was able to notice that there was something weird with the plate arrangement, and being able to tell, oh, a Shokugeki happened. And another thing is, if you were to question like why the heck is a town having Shokugekis, thankfully this is again another really good move on the author when it came to the writing. Earlier in the chapter when they were talking to that old man, the reason, like, there's a narrative reason to why that, or like, is it there? Yeah, there's a narrative reason as to why that interaction is happening with Soma, because the old man in that scene, he tells the viewer or tells the reader that, hey, we do know about Shokugekis because we know about Totsuki, right? When you have that kind of mentality and you understand that this village is centered around Totsuki and they have them in high respect, them adhering to Totsuki practices, or actually, it makes sense, right? It's a very smart move on the writer to include this one page. So in terms of being clever, I think this chapter is showing its stuff. And so it brings up my hopes for like the level of writing that we're gonna have for the arc. And like, really, it's not a big deal. We just need things to be tight and no kind of plot holes and no kind of weird logic going on. And so far, I think they're doing better. I think this might be a nice standalone volume to like have for Shokugeki no Soma if we continue at this pace. Now the rest of the chapter was mostly Megumi stuff, just like shots of Megumi and her little comedy. So if you are a Soma and Megumi shipper, you're gonna love these pages, right? If you like Megumi in general, you're gonna like these pages. These are just the feel-good pages. These are pages for fan service. These are pages for fans. Overall, pretty good. We got decent enough plot progression such that having the wasted pages, and I call it wasted only in the context of plot progression, but given Shokugeki no Soma's general standard when it comes to how much the plot will progress in a single chapter, this is pretty good. And I know that there was one Soma Megumi shipper in the comments, so I hope you are happy, because I think there were like a lot of nice little scenes going on here that when they get animated will be great for an AMV or something. But otherwise, I don't think I have much else to add. Like the writing points that I thought were really good are here. And I did find it funny also when halfway through it seemed like we were going to switch into a ghost story type arc, and it's like, okay, come on, we got stuff to do. But yeah, I feel like I have one more point that I wanted to mention before I forget. No, I remember, it's specifically a commenter, Tallow Wolf. You're the Megumi Soma shipper. Great. Actually, I'm reading through the comments again and I'm seeing like more people here talking real quick. I see Invader Rin and Tallow Wolf. You mentioned something along the lines too, that Soma and Megumi are like relatively similar, and I like your point a lot. And also that Invader Rin didn't really was also kind of wishing that there was someone else other than Megumi that was paired up with Soma, like maybe some of the characters that got shafted in the last arc. So I'm actually really curious, any commenter that wants to mention, are you ultimately happy with Soma and Megumi being together for this arc, or would you wish that we had other characters jumping in along with them or instead of Megumi? Heck, would you like to see a character that's not Soma dealing with things along with Megumi? I'm just actually really interested. Megumi is one of the main characters, so she's gonna get that screen time, so I'm interested to know if you'd rather another main character jump in, or if you would like more variety in who gets paired up with Soma for little adventures. I'd be interested in knowing. I'm gonna leave that question off for you guys, but yeah, let's call it there. Thanks very much for watching, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.